Hi guys, and welcome to another round of Tea and Chat with Carla Crivaro. Carla is a sex, love and relationship coach, and Carla has been on previously talking about another issue, in particular the mother-son relationship within a partnership. Now this time, Carla is going to be talking to us about a usual issue that men might have, and in this instance, that their partner isn't interested in sex. So welcome again, Carla. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks for having me back.
Carla is fresh back off holiday. So she's looking very glowing and tanned, and I'm so jealous. Now, Carla, so last time we talked about the mother-son relationship, and we had a lot of feedback off that. I had a lot of messages taken up my inbox, a lot of people saying they could totally relate with the issues that we discussed, and we did discuss quite a bit. And we had a few questions from the people that are in the group. Now this time, we're looking at a common issue that men might experience. And in this case, we're looking at partnerships where the female is not interested in sex, or is perceived as being not interested in sex. Now then, how common is this issue that you come across?
Reasonably common, and it's not because women aren't interested in sex. Like there was a study done that showed that women who are in long-term relationships, 18 months to 2 years into the relationship, get bored of the sex that they're having. So if they're like in a committed, like full-term marriage, or they might be cohabiting. So they actually, get bored of having sex. And the thing is, it's not that it's, women do crave variety. A lot of studies show that men tend to be a lot more, once they found a partner and they find the sex that they like, that they're just happy to continue doing what it is that they do. Women are the ones that tend to start thinking, okay, maybe we can introduce some toys, or maybe, lingerie, or what about exploring different sorts of kinks. And the thing is, you do get women who will go down that route and sort of take control of the sex life. And the problem that can be is, if you're always the one coming up with new ideas and new ways of doing things, that in itself can feel really frustrating, because going back to that whole mother and son dynamic, when women are constantly the ones that are taking control and doing things, doing that sometimes is okay. But when you're always in that sort of energy of leading the way and being the one that makes suggestions and taking control of situations, it's not very sexy. So no, that was definite no from Emma. So it's important, obviously, for women to have that feeling of men creating that variety. Also, as well, the type of sex that women can be having. So, when we have this idea of sex, we tend to think of kissing, some foreplay, penetration, the end. And it tends to be quite sort of linear. Whereas, a lot of it can actually be removing that sort of linear approach to sex and actually exploring pleasure instead. Because a lot of people have this idea that they've not had sex unless they've actually had penetration, so like penis in vagina. And when you remove that goal, and when you remove the goal of the man having his orgasm, because we also tend to think of sex has finished and it's concluded and we've reached what we're supposed to reach when, the man ejaculates. We remove all of that and we get really curious and explore pleasure in each other's bodies. It can take us on a different trajectory, which means that you can spend if you want to, hours in bed actually with somebody, and I question how many people are doing that. A lot of people, probably their sex takes somewhere between 15 to 30 minutes, I would imagine, like the average person that's having sex, rather than like 2 or 3 hours. And a lot of people are thinking probably to themselves, you know, my husband wouldn't be able to, or my partner wouldn't be able to last that long. And it's not about penis in vagina for 3 hours. It's about, you know, like exploring things like, you know, massaging each other's genitals, you know, really getting curious at different ways of touching and receiving, and, you know, really being mindful of just being present with each other's bodies, really getting curious to explore. So, you know, I think I'm sure if we discussed this last time, but I'm non-monogamous. So that means, you know, I have different relationships with different people. And, you know, when I have like a new partner, a lot of, you know, what we're exploring together is what different people like and what they enjoy, and, you know, offering different ways of being touched and getting curious, you know, bringing, different tools into the bedroom. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to start like getting out whips and chains or anything like that, but just like, you know, having a feather and just noticing where on the body it feels good. Maybe there's a place that you haven't been touched before that you want to experience, that, you know, that you want to get curious about. And, you know, it might be a feather, or it might be something like a fork, you know, having that sort of scraping sensation on the body for some people can be really erotic. It might be really erotic experiencing that sensation on one part of the body, but not on another. So how can we get really, really curious? And I think that's, you know, the really big word there, curious, and also, you know, pleasure. When you look at places with that offer, I think to the average person, they would consider them like sex parties. But when you go to like these types of conscious events, the word that they tend to use is play, you know, so they have like a lot of the conscious events where you're looking to learn your boundaries and communication about what you want and what you don't want. You know, a lot of these conscious events, they can like be 3 or 4 hours of really exploring all of that part of ourselves. And then at the end, you have what they call free play. And they remove the word sex from there and have play. Because if you look at sex from a position and a point of view of play, and you think, and you go into it with a childlike approach, and by childlike I mean obviously, you know, when you notice a child has something new or different, how it explores something, how it doesn't have an idea of what it should do or how it should be, or, you know, if you watch children when they're playing, they will take something that should be, in inverted commas, used in a particular way, and they adapt it for something completely different. And it's like, how can I bring that play, that curiosity into my sexual encounter with my partner? How can I really think differently and outside the box? And how can I slow everything down as well? We have this tendency, like I said, to want to get to orgasm. And, you know, yes, there is the orgasm gap, and I'll, you know, touch on that in a moment. But, you know, when we are focusing on just the orgasm itself, it really takes away that curiosity. So it's, where can I experience pleasure, and where can I, really have a completely different approach. Another, you know, sort of issue can be, as I just mentioned, like the orgasm gap. So what that is that through sexual encounters, women are less likely to experience orgasms than men. And that, again, can very often come from the fact that our idea of what sex is. A lot of women orgasm from clitoral stimulation, and having penetrative sex doesn't give women the option to actually have that orgasm. A lot of women will find that they reach orgasm a lot more easily from things like oral sex or digital sex. And by digits, I mean like fingers. So, you know, to reduce that orgasm gap, you know, again, it's about slowing everything down, knowing that it can take 20 to 40 minutes of stimulation and play before a woman will actually have an orgasm, you know. Yeah. So you need to slow everything right down. A woman needs to be really, really fully aroused. When you look at sort of like the Taoist approach to sex, they see men's sexuality is quite yang, so very fiery, very quick, and women's is yin and very watery and a lot slower to actually, blossom. So this is why spending that time and attention, really supporting the woman to reach full arousal means that she's more likely to have an orgasm. And the more that women experience orgasms and pleasure, the more of that they actually want. So, I always look to see if women are experiencing that for themselves. So like through self-pleasure, because when you self-pleasure and you're experiencing those orgasms for yourself, it turns you on more. You have greater access to pleasure. You're basically teaching your nervous system that pleasure is something that's easy for you to access. But if you're not self-pleasuring, then it's really difficult then, or it can be more difficult to really tune into and access your pleasure, because it's not a pathway that's been sort of really explored or creative for you in a really easy, fluid way. So those are sort of the initial thoughts that come to mind is, slowing everything down, curiosity is, when he's having sex with his partner, is she achieving orgasm? Is she reaching orgasm? And it's about supporting the woman to orgasm, not in a way of, because this is what can happen quite often, is that we get her orgasm out of the way and then we get onto the proper stuff, and there can be quite this idea in a lot of men's minds of, I need to get her to orgasm so then I can get on and have, an orgasm myself. And removing the idea that once a man has ejaculated, that's the end of sex. There's nothing to say that once a man's ejaculated, he can't go back to actually giving the woman more pleasure. It doesn't need to be the end. Why does it need to be the end? And it's a part of that fluid movement of, it not being such a linear approach. How can we experience pleasure and turn on without it just being penetration as the end goal? Watching each other self-pleasure. Another reason being is, when you watch somebody self-pleasure, you understand what turns them on and how they like to be touched. So you can learn a lot from watching each other self-pleasure. Having conversations as well and communicating around these things. A lot of people sort of expect sex to just happen. And it doesn't, it does take work. And what you've got to bear in mind is, when you first get with somebody and you have your first, sexual encounters, especially for a woman, it's very easy to get aroused. It's very easy to get turned on. It's the sense of excitement, the sense of newness. And to really keep that going, what a lot of women require is, a lot of presence from men. A lot of women need to feel the sense of, being desired and sexy, which doesn't necessarily come from the man. That's something that women need to explore themselves. Feeling sexy isn't about, necessarily wearing a particular lingerie. It's, do I have high feelings of self-worth and self-esteem and body confidence? And, that comes from an internal work of how you look at yourself. So, once women are able to connect to that and feel that within themselves, then it's easier then to tap into that. When your partner is wanting to interact with you, you can, call on that desire a lot more easily because you already feel it within yourself. Also, things that I think I mentioned last time that we had our conversation, giving each other compliments on genitals. I think there was somebody who was looking to support her husband in their anniversary or something. And noticing what comes up for you when somebody compliments your genitals is not a part of the body that we normally get compliments. And, when you first look at someone's genitals and think, what am I supposed to say? Because we as a society, we're always taught to understand what nice hair looks like, or what eyes should, in inverted commas, look like, or a smile, or whatever it might be. And again, it's really coming back to that, helping the other person feel good and creating that connection. Where can you find the enjoyment in the other person's genitals? Where can you look at them and say, okay, looking at size, looking at shape, all of those different parts, and thinking, okay, what do I like here? And for the person who's receiving those compliments, noticing also what's coming up for you. We hold a lot of judgment and shame around our own genitals and a lot of discomfort. So the first few times that you receive those compliments can feel really uncomfortable because, you feel really exposed. But the more practice that you have with it, and the more that you get to recognize that discomfort, and you hold yourself in it, and you become really aware of it, the more comfortable you feel with your own genitals. And that level of comfort that we have with our own bodies, again, enables us to tap into our sense of desire and our sense of pleasure a lot more, because we feel a lot more free. We feel a lot more able to express ourselves and just to relax more than anything. And obviously, orgasms and pleasure, for us to access those states, we need to be in a relaxed sense. We need to feel a certain amount of safety as well.
And I think what you said so far, I think a lot of people can relate to, because as you said, like, people have been together for a certain amount of time. Like when you first get with somebody, like you said, when you get with a new partner, it's all new and everything is all like, ooh. And then as time goes on, from the conversations I've had with people, it goes into a bit of a routine. And then if you have children, that can be a bit of a difficulty, trying to find the time. And then, we've only got 20-minute window, and you haven't got that time to explore. And like you were mentioning, connection as well. Like for a lot of people, I can see how what you've just said, they might be listening to this thinking, well, do you know what? When was the last time I properly connected and properly looked at my partner? When's the last time I complimented my partner, let alone complimented his bits, and vice versa. So I think that would, it would, people relate to that quite a lot, I think, because, I think that's probably quite a common problem when I've had conversations with people. I know when we have people coming onto this group, I tend to take the topic out to all my friendship group and we have a chat about it. And from what you said, I think a lot of people would relate to that. And connection's a massive thing. I mean, you need to have that to fully communicate, whether it's in terms of verbally or behavior wise with somebody. I think connection is massive. And I've listened to a lot of podcasts, and I mentioned this to you before. Stephen Bartlett talked about his relationships with women and sex, and he used the term language to describe sex. It's a language, and you need to know what language she speaks, and she needs to know what language you speak. And then, because he was just not paying attention to his partner at all, and he fully admitted it. He said he watched porn. He thought that's what women liked, and he thought that was it, and all women liked that, and that was just the standard fit. And then he found out that his partner didn't want sex. And you talked about this connection thing, and he realized then that, sex is a language. He needs to speak her language. What does she like? He started connecting, doing some of the things that you've mentioned, and his partner wanted sex again, and you say about communication, I just think that's massive. In my opinion, it's massive to know, to be able to feel comfortable with somebody to communicate what you like and to receive what they like, so I think it's quite a big thing from what you said. So we did have somebody that wrote in, and I know you've got a copy of it there, because there's quite a bit to talk around on this person alone. So this is a male that's messaged me. I did only have one message. We have sex once every couple of months if I'm lucky. I thought that after our 2 children had left home, we would have more time to spend together. We always talked about how much sex we would have when the kids left home and the dates we'd go on, but it's not happened at all. I love my wife dearly, and I'm always telling her how much she means to me, and I am a good husband. I thought we would have our life back a bit as we got older, but if I'm honest, I feel it's one big anticlimax. She spends her time at work, and I've got here another social groups. I haven't mentioned the social groups, but she's socializing a lot and going to work. Now, is this quite a common problem? Do you see this at all, where partners aren't interested in having sex at all?
Yeah, so and this can start like, because they've got children, it can start even before the children come along. But very, very often what happens when we get children, when we have children, related to that mother and son dynamic that I was talking about, women are taking on all of the roles, in the house, are doing all the chores. They can really feel like they are, almost mothering the partner that they have. You nearly left then, Emily.
No, sorry.
It's right. And what's interesting to note is the use of the word "I'm a good husband," and everyone's idea of what a good husband is really different. So a good husband could potentially be, yes, he does what he, in inverted commas, is told. Like he might be asked by his wife to do things and he goes and does them, and she asks him to go here and then he'll do that. But when he says good husband, my question would be like, how much of his own initiative is he using? Is he just doing as he's told, or is he also taking control of the situation? Is he being treated almost like a child and he's allowing himself to be treated like that? Is he lacking maybe boundaries? A good husband, I might find out if this person, is not able to say no. Maybe he might have got into the habit of people pleasing. And, it's just not sexy as a woman if you are always, like I said, in control, always the one deciding, always the one making decisions. It doesn't feel good to always be the one that's holding everything together, And also, if you have a partner that doesn't have boundaries, so when you turn around and you say something, you might speak to them in a way that's not necessarily appropriate, and they don't stand up for themselves and they don't place boundaries, that's not sexy either, and a lot of men can feel emasculated, and a lot of women can emasculate men as well in how they speak to and how they deal with men. And this sort of like imbalance, let's say, of power is not really the word, but sort of like communication and the direction everything is moving in, this sort of imbalance can really affect how women feel about themselves. This need for a lot of women to surrender. And by surrender, I don't mean being passive. I mean to fully let go and fully feel like they're being held in whatever comes up for them. For women, for example, to experience G-spot orgasms, quite often a lot of women talk about the fact that they get a lot of emotional release. Now, if you don't feel that your partner can really hold space for that, because whenever you say something to them, they always, retract, or they always, make themselves smaller or behave in an emasculated way, and they can't hold space for maybe your anger or whatever it might be. When you have G-spot stimulation and you need to maybe just fully let go and release all your emotions, and this includes, things like squirting as well, that ability to be able to fully let go. If you can't, if you don't have like the space and the container to do that the man's creating, then you're not going to be able to experience that. So yeah, being very, very mindful of, as a man, what sort of container are you creating for the relationship? What does good husband mean to you? If it's people pleasing and self-abandoning, that's not a good husband. It's not good for yourself. And it's not sexy for you, and it's not sexy either for your partner. So yeah, when I saw that word, I was like, just because, I do get men, because I've talked about this phenomenon that I see, and I've called it the forgotten father. And basically it's when men become parents, quite often it can start during pregnancy. They can feel a sense of isolation, rejection, and they miss the intimacy that they used to have with their partners. And by intimacy, I don't necessarily mean sexual, but just like emotional intimacy. And, a lot of men have this idea that when the kids get older, which is something else that, was talked about. We all talked about how much sex we would have when the kids left home. And it's like, you can't wait for things to change. You need to find a way right now. Yes, having a baby that's 2 months old is going to be a little bit more difficult, but the moment that you can, creating and dedicating that time together is so, so important right at the beginning, because otherwise you get out of the habit. Obviously what's, happened in this situation, the fact that she's found other social groups, because possibly he's not taken the lead and the control of, let's do this, let's go here. And they haven't made that connection to be together. She's gone looking for those connections and that community elsewhere. And this is a really, really common thing with men, to sort of wait for things to happen. Like things are just going to get better without wanting to. And I think a lot of that comes from how men are socially conditioned to just keep going and get on with it. You can't really admit to problems. Men are really taught from a young age not to be able to express themselves and not to express their needs, because a lot of men feel this pressure to just be the provider and the breadwinner and to do the right thing, without ever looking at what their own needs might be. And the problem with that conditioning that men can get from a really young age means that they don't tend to always engage in conversation around what's not working. And quite often, women aren't engaging in those conversations as well. And if they do, it's not always necessarily in the most supportive way. Women can do it. A lot of us can do it from a sense of blame. You don't do this and you don't do that. Whereas I think, what we need to be mindful of when we are wanting to bring up difficult conversations is, coming at it from a place of responsibility of how I feel. So, using I statements. So rather than you aren't doing this and you are creating a problem, I don't feel seen when I need to talk to you about problems, rather than saying you don't listen to me. So taking that back on and being responsible for it. So having those conversations where we are able to really communicate our needs and desires, not just in the bedroom, but outside, because not being able to communicate it outside the bedroom is going to affect how things go inside the bedroom as well. And yeah, if we don't talk about what our needs are outside of the bedroom, how can we be expected to do that inside as well?
I've written here as well, one of the questions I tagged off it was, how often should you have sex? Is there because he's written once every couple of months. So how often should you be having sex? Is there a number, or is it just what suits you? Because like that might be a question a lot of people will be thinking, like, how often should we be having sex?
It's really, really down to the individual person and the individual couple, because people do have higher libidos, and it's not, a lot of people have this idea that men have higher libidos than women. It's actually not true. Like women's libidos are a lot higher. And there's like research that shows that actually women can get turned on by a lot more stuff and get sexually aroused by a lot more different things than men can. There was one research done that showed, women could get arousal just by watching like bonobos have sex, as an example. So whereas, that didn't have any effect on men's sexual arousal. So there's lots of research shows that, yes, there doesn't need to be, everybody, each individual person will have their own level of libido, and that will be affected by lots of different external factors. Like I said, with regards to women, they tend to, after 18 months, 2 years, require a lot more variety. That's why, just as an example, like with regards to non-monogamy, 2/3 of relationships that are opened up are actually the opening up of the relationship is instigated by women. A lot of people would think, oh, it's men that want that. But actually, it's women, because quite often what can happen, and possibly what's happened in this situation here with the person in the group is, 18 months, 2 years, the sex is going reasonably well because we're following the same format that we have done: kissing, foreplay, penetration, the end. That's great for the first 18 months, 2 years when the person's new. but then you get into this sort of like, you know, sex just isn't interesting to me anymore as a woman. It's just not, you know, I'm not really getting much from it, so I'm not really that bothered. And then the women tend to think that's because I'm not a sexual person and I don't have a libido. It's not that at all, because if you put them with a completely new relationship, it would start afresh. So what it is, it's about, okay, how can we support women to maintain that pleasure? And it is, as I said, you know, changing our idea of what sexual encounters are, using the words such as play, curiosity, pleasure, and, you know, encouraging men to, really think outside of the box with regards to just some simple things like, you know, a lot of men think that for them to experience pleasure, or for a woman to experience pleasure, that men need to have an erection. Just not true at all. You know, you can give a woman pleasure and not have an erection. You know, you can do it via oral sex, digital sex, you know, anal play, whatever it might be, and you don't need an erection for that. There's a lot of people now that encourage what's called soft cock sex, which is, you know, if you want to have penetration, having penetration with a soft cock. And that's something that's becoming, you know, more and more popular as people are recognizing that, you know, how we need to look at and experience pleasure and you know, our own sexuality needs to change for our sense of self, for our self-esteem, and also, you know, for how we connect with each other in relationship.
And it's to have an open mind, isn't it? It's not having that, you know, what you see in the media in general. I think that has a massive impact on people, and obviously how your past experiences have shaped, you know, how you are with people. That's massive, and it's just having an open mind. And this is my opinion, but having an open mind on what kind of things you can do, and you know, there's no limits really, is there? Really, you know, the kind of things you can do. It's not just, as you said, just about penetration, foreplay, penetration, the end. There are so many things you can do. And again, it goes back down to what you were saying about communication. And again, you've mentioned this before in your last one, but when you're talking to your partner, as you said, about the not saying you make me feel this way, it's saying I feel this way, and just not being so, what's the word? I can't think of the word, you know, pointing the finger at
blaming.
Yeah, blaming. Again, that's kind of massive, because when I read this, I thought, well, you know, that can sometimes happen in relationships where one partner's like, well, you know, I'm really frustrated, but, you know, because you've done this, or you're not having sex with me. And then if that was me on the receiving end, I'd go, well, I don't want to have sex with a grumpy man.
Yeah, you retract.
Yeah, go the opposite way. So yeah, communication, and definitely keeping an open mind, because some of the things you've described, you have heard of. There's some stuff I haven't. So I'm going to be going Googling that later now. What's that about?
Yeah, I think the last sentence as well is really telling. So she spends her time at work and in other social groups. You know, I think that's really telling as to how much of a relationship they actually have together outside of the bedroom. And, you know, where she's looking to get her needs, and I'm not talking sexual needs, but connection needs met in other situations, because maybe she's not feeling that in her relationship. Obviously, it's really difficult to say exactly what might be happening. You know, maybe she's experiencing lots of stress, which is affecting her libido.
I don't know the age, and I don't want to assume, but there's other things. I'm like menopause. You know, I work with menopause groups with my business, and a lot of women report that they're just not interested in sex whatsoever. They just don't have it, you know. And then you hear the other side where women have had treatment for their menopause, and they're like, oh, I've got my libido back, yay. And they're doing all sorts again. So there's other factors, isn't it? And just be mindful that it's not just someone not wanting to be with you.
Yeah. The thing is as well with like menopause, for example, a lot of women might attribute their loss of libido to the menopause. Sometimes it's not that. It's because they've just got to that specific stage in their relationship where it's just like, there's something missing. You know, what was there isn't there. The kids have left home. All of a sudden you notice that you're not having sex. Before you didn't have time. Now you're
Yeah.
noticing that you're not having it, and it becomes more of an issue because like, now I've got time for sex and I'm not feeling it. And it can be around the time of menopause. Yes, for sure, hormones can and do affect your libido. But also we've got to bear in mind that a lot of women that are perimenopausal and menopausal, they've got to, that, you know, especially if they're in a relationship with a man and that they have children, when all of a sudden things sort of stop and you look inward at yourself, that's the point that you go, oh, hang on a minute, what happened to my libido? Oh, it must be the menopause, you know. And it doesn't necessarily actually, it's not necessarily that. It can be, but it can also be just where you are in the stages of your life as well, and your relationship.
Have you got any top tips then? If you're in a relationship and we'll say whether it's male or female, either way, that doesn't want to engage or is showing that they don't want to engage in a partnership and in the sexual sort of relationship, is there any like top tips you could give somebody if somebody's experiencing this now and their partner not interested in sex? What would be the top tips or top 3 things that they could do, or as a starting point?
I would suggest a communication exercise. So I think I maybe talked about it last time, like a mirroring exercise. So basically ask a question, you know, for example, how can we bring more pleasure into our relationship? You know, so removing the word sex, how can we bring more pleasure into our relationship? Because once, like I said, your nervous system and your neural pathways are like focused on pleasure, then it's more easy to look for pleasure, you know, in lots of areas of your life. So asking that question, setting a timer for like 3 to 5 minutes, allowing the person to speak. You know, you just continue to ask that, you know, if they have a bit of a pause, you say thank you. And then ask again, you know, how can we bring more pleasure into our relationship? And then from that information, you give yourself like 24 hours to then return to it and go, okay, you know, what can we do with this information that's been shared? How can we create an action plan moving forward? Or another type of exercise is like specifically mirroring. So, you know, you set a timer again for 3 to 5 minutes and you ask the question, and when they say, you know, what comes up for them, you're repeating it back to them so that they feel validated and they feel seen. So these communications can really help give people the opportunity to talk and feel like they're being seen. So I would say a communication exercise to start with. Also, understanding the different sort of types of touch. There's if people go onto YouTube, there is a woman called Betty Martin, and she looks at consent, and not consent necessarily like around, you know, assault or anything like that, but consent in the sense of when I am touching another person, am I touching that person for their pleasure or am I touching them for my pleasure? And it's been really, really mindful of, you know, understanding what that dynamic is. She calls it the 3-minute game. So people go on and first of all watch the video called the 3-minute game, and then after that watch the video Wheel of Consent. So both of those are on YouTube. It's important you watch the 3-minute game first to understand it, to then listen to her explanation. But what that's about is it's about learning that when I am touching somebody, am I touching them in the way that they want and that they're asking for? Are they, you know, or are they just allowing me to touch them because I think that that's what they want? They think that they're doing me a favor by allowing me to touch how I want, and nobody's actually experiencing any pleasure. So getting really, really clear. And this 3-minute game isn't a sexual thing. It's actually, you know, like massaging the head or the hands or the arms, you know, to start off with, completely removing the sexual aspect of it, really getting to understand who is this for, who's benefiting from this, and getting really, really clear on that. The reason being is when you eventually take that into the bedroom and, for example, you are giving oral sex, are you giving oral sex because you enjoy doing particular acts on the person and you're wanting to get the pleasure from giving oral sex because that pleasure is for you? Or are you giving oral sex because you want the person receiving the oral sex to experience pleasure? Because then how you approach that interaction is going to be completely different.
Yeah.
You know, and how you communicate it. Because if you're giving oral sex because you want the person to receive pleasure, the person receiving oral sex to also receive the pleasure, then what's important is how you touch them, where you touch them, and when you touch them needs to be dictated by the person receiving, not by the person that's given. If I am giving oral sex for my own pleasure, then how I interact and how I touch the person is completely for my curiosity, and the other person obviously needs to state their boundaries if something doesn't feel good to them as well. So, and this, you know, this type of sort of communication, starting with something really non-sexual like touching hands and arms, can be really good to explore actually who is this for. So mirroring and communication exercise, exploring touch. And then my third tip would be looking at changing language. So, you know, looking at play, looking at, you know, pleasure, and looking at curiosity. So how can I bring pleasure, play, and curiosity into not just the bedroom, but outside the bedroom as well? Are you having fun with your partner? You know, do you have giggles? Do you do things and just roll around, you know, laughing at something that somebody has done? Or, you know, where are you bringing that curiosity into your relationship generally? When was the last time that, you know, your partner spoke to you and you actually was 100% present there, listening to everything that they said? Because once you're able to do that, you know, in the kitchen or, you know, the sitting room, you know, after a busy day at work, then it's easier then to bring it into the bedroom. You know, that idea of pleasure. Where can we bring pleasure into our lives? With food, with, you know, maybe like going to get massages together, whatever it might be. Where can I get pleasure? Where can I bring curiosity about the other person? Where can I really like sort of tap into getting to know this person? Because we change constantly, and we always have this idea of people of who they are when we got with them initially, but we're always evolving as human beings. How can I get curious to understand who this person is now? And then play, you know, how can I bring more play into our relationship? Where can we bring more fun? And then take that into the bedroom as well.
Yeah, and I think I agree with that, because as soon as you put that label sex on it, if you're a person that's, you know, sort of you're feeling like your partner's always hounding you for it, and it instantly probably makes you feel like, oh God, defense thing up. So play sounds fun, doesn't it? It's a happy word. I think it is anyway. So yeah, oh, thank you so much. Do you know what? Again, it's loads of information I've got off that, and like I think a lot of people again are going to be able to relate to this. Like I said, from the last one, the messages I had and the people that I speak to weekly talked about it as well, and got some good advice off there as well. So thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. And I just hope that the people watching this again will, you know, take the advice and have better relationships, better sex. So for people, if they want to get hold of you, it's carlacrivaro.com, isn't it? I will pop it up here again. And again, for people who are listening, carlacrivaro.com. So thank you so much for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Emily.
And I hope there's another topic we can think of and you come on again.
I'm sure that once people have heard this one, there'll be some more questions that come up. So yeah, you'll be able to let me know what the next ones are.
Well, it's great to see things from both sides, isn't it? A common female issue and a common male issue. And it just goes to show how, in some ways, how different men and women are, but at the same time, how similar. It all boils down to sort of the communication, doesn't it? You know, and just talking to each other. So I really, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. And hope to see you soon. And you can recover after your holiday now.
Thanks,
so
Emily.
carlacrivaro.com. Thank guys. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, stopped video now, I think.